Kai looked at Leeway, explaining that he hadn't been aware of the gun and had only noticed Fang's strange behavior when the weapon became visible, prompting him to intervene. Leeway chuckled lightly, his expression sharp, as he thought about the audacity of Fang daring to bring a gun into his company, daring to aim it at him, daring to strike at the woman he cared for. His mind sharpened with a cold resolve, realizing that he had been far too lenient in the name of family, and that it was finally time to teach Fang a lesson he would never forget. Kai suggested that Fang might have been manipulated into such extreme measures, but Leeway didn't falter. His gaze hardened, his voice cutting icy and precise, declaring that Fang was a grown man, nearly in his 40s, a man with the capacity to discern right from wrong. The idea that he could be manipulated was nonsense, he thought, and he intended to show him how to properly handle a gun, how not to miss his target, how to face the consequences of his actions. Kai remained silent, sensing the depth of Leeway's resolve, understanding that any attempt to defend Fang would only make matters worse. He knew Leeway would hold nothing back now, especially since Amara had been hurt in the process. The nurse arrived, announcing that Amara was awake. Without a second wasted, Leeway bolted toward her hospital room, his steps precise and urgent, leaving Kai behind, knowing full well that Fang would soon feel the full weight of Leeway's wrath. Meanwhile, Momo stood in Ming's office, her curiosity bubbling as she asked about the location for their date. Ming smiled, insisting it was a surprise, determined not to spoil it. Momo leaned closer, pleading for details, but Ming refused, shaking his head and remaining coy. Her curiosity only grew. She moved closer still, teasing him, asking if he finally would admit he loved her, if he couldn't breathe without her. Ming laughed softly, facing away, brushing off her teasing with an embarrassed chuckle. Momo, undeterred, pressed forward, seeing how adorable he looked when flustered. She lightly placed her hand over her chest, feigning pain. Ming immediately stepped toward her, concern sharp in his eyes, asking if she was all right. She continued, still holding her chest, claiming something was wrong with her heart. Ming moved even closer, examining her carefully, worry etched across his face. Momo leaned in, her eyes locking with his, and whispered that her heart wasn't merely unwell, it yearned for him, that it wanted him to occupy it. Ming's face flushed, and he told her to stop joking, insisting he had genuinely feared something was wrong. Momo's determination didn't waver. She pressed his hand over her chest, refusing to let it move away. She asked him if he could feel the way her heart beat, and when he nodded, she told him it raced like that whenever she saw him. She confessed that from the first moment she had laid eyes on him, she knew he would be hers, and she would make the best partner and housewife he could ever have. Ming stood frozen, disbelief mingling with astonishment, marveling at the courage she possessed. A girl so straightforward, so unafraid to chase exactly what she wanted. Their hands stayed connected over her chest as their gazes locked, tension, emotion, and vulnerability pulsing between them. The moment shattered suddenly as a nurse burst into the office, startling them both. Ming stepped back, embarrassed, immediately asking if she needed anything. The nurse's eyes were urgent as she reported that the female patient with the heart condition was showing a response. Ming's eyes widened, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Meanwhile, Leeway stepped into Amara's hospital room, his gaze immediately locking on her wide-awake form. Relief washed over him as he rushed to her side, sitting down carefully beside her, his hands instinctively reaching out to check on her. He asked how she felt, if she was experiencing any pain, his voice taut with concern. Amara looked at him and smiled softly, assuring him that she was okay. Leeway's eyes narrowed slightly, frustration creeping into his voice as he asked what had driven her to put herself in such danger. He needed to know why she had taken a risk that could have cost her life. Amara met his gaze steadily, telling him she couldn't stand idly by while he was in harm's way. If she hadn't shielded him, he would have been shot. Liwei's hands clenched slightly at her words, his frustration rising as he reminded her that this did not give her permission to risk herself. He was the one who should be protecting her, he insisted, and as her man, he could not bear the thought of anything happening to her. Amara held his hand gently, pressing it over hers, her eyes soft with sincerity. She told him that the important thing was that she was unharmed, and that for him, she would willingly take a bullet. That was the depth of her love for him. She would not hesitate to give her life for his. Liwei's chest tightened as her words sank in, his emotions stirring. He pulled her close, holding her tightly against him, his voice low and tremulous as he told her she had frightened him and that she should never do that again. From now on, he insisted, he would be the one taking risks for her. She would never face danger alone. Amara buried her head against his chest, seeking the comfort and strength of his embrace. She looked up, her curiosity breaking through, and asked if he truly planned to announce their relationship publicly. Leeway nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. Confusion flickered across Amara's face as she asked why, remembering his earlier warnings about danger. Leeway remained silent, concealing the truth, that this public announcement was part of a plan to draw out the mastermind. The door opened, and Kai stepped inside. His eyes drifted to Amara first, relief and warmth evident in his expression. He moved closer and told her that he was glad she was safe, adding with a small smile that next time he would be the one taking a bullet for her. Her body was too precious to be harmed. He glanced at Leeway to gauge his reaction, reading the subtle sharpness in his gaze, and laughed lightly before moving away. Kai turned back to Leeway, informing him that police officers were waiting outside and wished to speak about the incident. Leeway stood immediately, turning to Amara and assuring her that he would return soon. Kai looked back at her, telling her again how glad he was she was unharmed, and that when she was released from the hospital, he insisted on taking her out to thank her for saving his friend. Amara smiled softly, declining politely, but Kai remained firm, stating he would not accept refusal. With that, he finally left. Outside, Leeway met the police officers, Kai standing silently beside him. One officer addressed Leeway, explaining that they had chosen to meet him personally rather than call him to the station to protect his reputation. They asked him to recount exactly what had transpired. Leeway responded calmly, stating there was no need for concern, and that it was a family matter. The officer pressed further, emphasizing that the presence of a gun in a crowded area could not be overlooked, and that they needed to understand the motives behind it. They mentioned reports suggesting the gun had been aimed at Leeway. Leeway explained, keeping his voice measured, that it was not intended as an assassination. Fang had been struggling mentally and emotionally after their father's death and had brought the gun with the intent to harm himself. Kai had intervened, and the shot had been accidental. He reiterated that it was a family matter, noting that Fang had been taken to a mental institution for treatment and apologized for the commotion caused. The officers exchanged glances, then asked for confirmation. Leeway nodded, and Kai immediately backed him up, confirming the truth of the account. The police officers thanked them and assured them the matter would be closed before departing. Kai turned to Leeway, suspicion and curiosity written across his face. He asked why Leeway had suddenly defended Fang after everything, moving closer to demand to know his true intentions. Leeway met his gaze for a long, silent moment before finally answering that Fang was family. He could not allow his life to be ruined over a situation that could be resolved with understanding and communication. He added that they needed to sit down with Fang and help him return to the light. Kai's eyes narrowed, disbelief etched across his features. This was not the Leeway he knew. The man he had seen in action, ruthless and unyielding, especially when Amara had been in danger. Leeway chuckled softly, a quiet, knowing sound, before walking back into Amara's hospital room. Kai remained behind, his mind racing, trying to decipher Leeway's intentions. He knew that the calm, peaceful words were not the whole truth. Leeway never spared anyone who hurt Amara. Meanwhile, Ming rushed into May and James's daughter's hospital room, moving straight to her bedside as he observed her closely. There was an improvement, subtle but unmistakable. The method he was using to save her heart had worked. He leaned closer, calling out to her softly, asking her if she could hear him, telling her that if she could, she should try to move her finger. He stood there tense and anxious, eyes fixed on her hand. A faint movement suddenly followed, her finger lifting ever so slightly. Ming's eyes glistened with relief, a quiet breath escaping him as the weight on his chest loosened. He turned to the nurse, instructing her to continue with the treatment, informing her that there was definite improvement and that the girl should be able to open her eyes in a few days. The nurse nodded, jotting down his instructions as he glanced at the girl again, adjusting her drip with practiced care before walking out. He made his way into Amara's hospital room, finding Leeway sitting beside her, fast asleep, his head tilted slightly forward, his hand clutched tightly to hers as if letting go would mean losing her again. Ming stepped closer and gently woke him. Leeway stirred, lifting his eyes immediately toward Amara before turning to Ming. Ming told him he should go home, reminding him that he had been there the entire day, that he needed proper rest and time to freshen up. Leeway's gaze drifted back to Amara, unwilling to separate himself from her, but Ming reassured him that she was okay, that the gunshot wound was not fatal, and that she would be discharged the following day. He could come back then to take her home. Leeway hesitated, the conflict evident in his expression, but he finally rose to his feet and asked Ming if he was sure. Ming, calm and steady, reminded him that he was a doctor and knew what he was talking about. He told him again that it had been a long day and rest was necessary. Leeway finally gave in, saying he would go and return the next morning. He pleaded with Ming to take care of her, and Ming nodded. Leeway leaned in one last time, pressing a gentle kiss to Amara's forehead before walking out of the room. Ming glanced at his cell phone as he left, realizing that it was nearly time for his date with Momo. He thought about how he needed to get ready, then hurried out as well. Meanwhile, Fang stood alone in the room he had been locked in, shouting in frustration, asking if anyone was there. He called out for Kai, demanding that he open the door, insisting that he couldn't do this to him. The lock finally clicked, and Kai stepped inside. Fang rushed at him immediately, scolding him, telling him he was out of his mind for locking him up the entire day. He reminded him that he was older and would not tolerate such disrespect. Kai's gaze sharpened as he told him that if he behaved like a child, he would treat him like one, because that was what he deserved. He added coldly that Fang should be less worried about petty grievances and more worried about Leeway, because Leeway was coming for him and would not spare him. He stepped closer, telling him he needed to run, tonight, and get as far away from Shanghai as he could, because staying would turn his life into hell. Fang laughed, refusing to be intimidated. He said he wasn't scared of Leeway and hated how everyone portrayed him as ruthless when he wasn't. He added that he would be waiting, and that the next time Leeway came he wouldn't miss. He would shoot him dead. Kai stared at him, frustrated by how stubborn he remained, trying to continue speaking, but Fang pushed past him and stormed out, leaving Kai standing there with a growing sense of dread for his brother's foolishness. Fang drove back home, muttering to himself, furious that he hadn't managed to shoot Leeway. He cursed Amara for getting in his way and Kai for ruining his plan. As he pressed harder on the accelerator, he glanced at the rearview mirror. Leeway's car appeared behind him, closing the distance at full speed, unmistakably coming for him.